Cool. So welcome everybody to Den Music Fest 2020. Today is day 2. We had an amazing lineup yesterday of artists who performed from all over the world. And today, this is session 3 of our artist development sessions. So in the middle of a pandemic, we decided to add a whole extra day to the festival and make sure that we made good quality information accessible to artists. My name is Nora Rahimi, and I'm one of the co-founders of, co-producers of Den Music Fest, along with Last Name Good. And just a little like agenda switch. I know today's session, Kieran was gonna join us. He was the owner of the music room where Den Music Fest has lived for the last 3 years. But he was last minute unable to join us. So we're gonna kind of open it up, still talk about what pivots and merch and touring and all these things look like in a socially distant world. But we're gonna do it more kind of informal, more, you guys, it has been a long day. Do it more informal, more panel style. So as we're talking, if you have any questions, please, and we're a small group, so feel free to like unmute yourself, raise your hand, drop it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. I do want to introduce Natalie Crew, who's also going to be on the panel with us. Natalie is co-founder of Culture Fix. She's worked with artists around the world doing creative stuff. Nat, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Oh yeah, I'm Natalie Crew. I co-founded Culture Fix with Nora, as she mentioned 5 seconds ago. I'm also a cultural producer, so I've done everything from produce large-scale festivals to tons of virtual events. I've also worked in the blockchain sector for a few music companies and merch for Too Short, all kinds of, a laundry list of things over the last 12, 13, 14, 15 years. So yeah, I lost track of time.
So I think this conversation that we were starting to have is maybe a good place to start around what is a PRO, performing rights organization. Like what Justin was saying is so many artists have it but don't know what to do with it. So Justin, why don't you start us off there?
Sure. So performance right organization, or PRO for short, the 3 main ones that we always talk about, well, especially here within the States, is ASCAP, BMI, and SESAC, right? And just to give you a quick overlay of each one, they really all work fairly similar. The main difference that I can tell you is that SESAC is a smaller company, and so they're a little more hands-on, meaning that you probably can call and get one of their representatives on the phone a lot quicker if you have a question than with ASCAP and BMI. ASCAP and BMI, are great companies. They've been around long, but they're kind of the industry standards, so to speak. So with the industry standard comes a lot of artists. So they have a lot of overhead and they have a lot of people to deal with. So they might have some staff, but they're going to be a little less quick to answer your questions. I personally use ASCAP, and like we were talking about before we actually got started, the only reason why I went with ASCAP is because I had a buddy who said, hey, you need to sign up with ASCAP. And he didn't really give me a lot of information on it. It was just like, hey, if you want to be in this music business, you need to make sure that you at least get with ASCAP, BMI. But so I use ASCAP. That's what I have. I've been with them since 2004. And for anyone that doesn't know exactly what they do, the main objective or goal or their job is to collect royalties on your behalf. So whenever your song is played in a TV commercial, on Spotify, iTunes, whenever you perform inside of a venue, believe it or not, when DJs play your songs in venues, even though that doesn't happen a lot, but once a DJ plays your music inside of a club, you're technically supposed to get paid off of that, right? So all of these things happen. They collect those type of royalties, and they pay on a monthly basis, but they do pay in 3-month increments, meaning that if I submit a song that happened back in January, I won't get paid on such song until, do the math real quick, April, right? And so it happens in the 3 month increments. If you are a writer and a publisher, which I strongly suggest that everyone is, you'll get paid twice. You'll get paid a writer share and a publisher share. So that schedule is different depending on the pro that you're with, but ultimately you'll still get paid off of all of those things, and they have their schedules kind of detailed on their website. But I do suggest any artist that if you don't do anything else from listen to this conversation, make sure that you are aligned with a pro that works best for you. ASCAP, CSAC, BMI are the main three. There is another one out there, but I honestly don't have a lot of information on them, so I can't really speak on their behalf. But you can look it up. There are plenty of them, but those are the main ones that really collect on your behalf. Not to mention, there are a few digital ones like Sound Exchange that collect on your behalf. And those are honestly, my experience is it's trickier. Um, and the only way that I can truly give my opinion on them is that this digital space that we're in, it is kind of like the Wild Wild West. And so with it being the Wild Wild West, there's so many things that are forever changing. And so the best advice that I can give with dealing with a company like Sound Exchange is to keep your content and your paperwork and things up to date as best as possible. So if you're someone who is constantly releasing music, you need to notate that and let Sound Exchange know every time you're releasing music, every project you put out, every song that you wrote on, you need to update. And this needs to happen with everyone, but particularly with Sound Exchange, if you don't update your catalog, good luck getting paid off of your catalog. So you have to continue to update on a normal basis. So that's where we're at here. And Nora, I don't want to ramble on. So if you have anything, just feel free to let me know, and I can kind of speak from there on
No,
that.
I think this is an important part of the conversation, to carry over some of the things we talked about in the last session. The PROs that Justin is mentioning are unique to the US, so they're going to collect for you
Right.
in the US. So if you are an artist and you're doing really well in another country, different countries have different kind of collection and tracking mechanisms. So you're going to have to want to make sure you're registered and on top of that there. And then to also make sure that when you're co-creating, co-writing with others, that you talk about what your splits are going to look like in advance. So a split is how much credit do you get for a song? How much credit does the other writer get for a song? How much credit does the producer get? You know, all the people involved, how do you split up those credits? And a split sheet can be as simple as you send an email while you're in the studio that says, here's what we all agreed to, or you take a scratch paper and write down some notes and sign it. It doesn't have to be a fancy formal kind of document, but it does need to be something that you all in some way expressly agree to. Because when you go to register for you go and put the song on ASCAP, for example, they're gonna ask, okay, who all wrote the song and how many points do they get? So that they know how to split that money amongst everybody. Talking about money, I think, is one of the things that artists are often really uncomfortable with. And so it's a good thing to start getting in practice with. And even if it's not money, maybe you're doing like a service exchange with someone, or you're doing a trade collaboration, to get into the habit of whatever conversation that you've had, whatever you've agreed on the exchange being, ask for it in writing. Because someone, not even because people have bad intentions, right? No, they might not even be trying to screw you over. They forgot, right?
Bad
They
memory.
agreed to, yeah, bad memory. Or, I mean, especially now, everyone's stressed, they're like
Right.
overworked. And so to get into the habit of, hey, I just wanted to send an email just to follow up. This is what we agreed upon. Want to make sure I understood everything. If this is okay with you, just let me know.
Right.
Doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be like a whole formal contract, but just so that you have it in writing, so that if things ever go wrong, you've already set yourself up for you want to prepare for your ultimate success and be ready for the worst case scenario, so that if things ever go one way or the other, you have that document to go back to and say, here's what we talked about.
Right. Nor on the flip side of that, I do want to speak on the situation where that doesn't happen. Because to be fair, a lot of times we are caught in the creative process and we don't get around to doing that. And I can, for one, can say I've been in that situation several times where, hey, we go in and, for me personally, I've been a stage in my career where I only work with people who I really want to work with. Right. I went through that process where I did the placement hustle game, and honestly, I just wasn't cut out for that. That wasn't my lifestyle. I started getting frustrated with that process, and I found myself changing who I was musically to try to get placements. And ultimately, I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to work with people who I like to work with and artists who are trying to build up, right? As opposed to try to run and grab and throw, one of 500 other beats at an artist and hopefully that somebody picks up, right? Without building a solid relationship. And so sometimes it happens where you're just vibing, you're in the studio and you never really talk about splits. And then it comes up later on. And so I wanted to kind of speak on how to have that conversation later as opposed to up front, because up front is the ideal time, but it just doesn't happen all the time. So my suggestion is, once you get to a place to where it's time to start handling quote unquote paperwork, the best entry point to that is saying something simple as, hey, who are you registered with? ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. Because what that does is it for one, it gives you a lot of information depending on how they answer that question. So if a person says, what are you talking about? Now I'll be honest with you. We are in the music industry and sometimes bad business is done. Some people will hear that and say, bingo. Oh, no, don't worry about it. But if you're being a fair and good person, that's the time to educate the person that you're working with and let them know about these pro organizations, right? And so, but that's a great entry question to just start the conversation. And once you have that answer, you can go from there and talk about. I'll tell you personally, if I'm working with an artist, it's always 50-50 for me because we're both coming to the table and we're working on that. Now, if we have to pull in other resources, then that's when we really have to come in and do more negotiating. But if it's just, me and one other artist, hey, this is the project we worked on. Let's split it 50-50 down the middle, and then we can go from there. And if, there's always room for negotiating. If someone doesn't like the 50-50 split, then you have to go from there. But what's important is that you're having the conversation. What you should not do is go and register a record without having a conversation with the other party. Never do that. Absolutely never do that. And believe it or not, if you go and try to register a record, ASCAP, I know for certain, ask the question, are you in a contract with said person that you're registering this work for? So you're already legally putting yourself at fault if you're lying about that and you click yes. That is, believe it or not, a legally binding document. And that's just like how we go on our phones and download an app and click yes without even realizing that we just gave them access to our entire data on our phone. So be mindful of those things. Don't go out there and try to register a work without actually talking to the person that you work with. It'll save you a world of trouble going down the line and a lot of headaches as well.
Mm-hmm. And just the last thing I'll add on this is, if there's people that you're going to work with regularly, like those are your frequent collaborators, then you can have a standing agreement. Anytime we work together, the split will be 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever. And you don't have to revisit the conversation every single time, but that's just your standing agreement with your frequent collaborators. Any other questions on this ASCAP PRO publishing piece before we move on? And as questions come up for people, feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself. As I said, we want this to be as interactive and conversational as we can get on Zoom. So one of the things I wanted us to talk about today, I know a lot of artists here are touring artists. And with COVID and all the social distancing, touring is no longer as viable as it once was. And so, Natalie, maybe you can start us off with this, and then Justin, I want to come to you. Um, what are ways that artists can make up for not being able to tour in the ways that they used to, but still have that fan engagement and still have that income stream?
I definitely think there are a lot more opportunities, funny enough, in this digital space to kind of rethink how we look at touring. So, tons of Den Music Fest has gone virtual this year, but still have many other festivals across the globe. From Hip Hop Al Parque, which is one of the largest hip hop festivals in the world. They do about 100,000 people every year. They've had to figure out how to come online. There's tons of other spaces as well outside of the hip hop world that are going online and virtual. There are tons of conferences, like Midem's having an event next in a soon, I think. And so you can kind of rethink like how can I tour like these digital spaces and put together like a digital tour. So you can go do some have a panel at Midem, which is a conference they've had in Europe for a very long time. There's also like some other spaces like you there's tons of like music platforms in the UK that you can put together like a digital event with, not just a panel but a performance or a Q&A project. Be very creative in like how you frame this, but there's tons of opportunities to kind of like rethink this touring aspect. I know Masia One, who's a really dope artist out of Singapore slash Malaysia, she did something very similar where she did a worldwide tour of these digital spaces. She went to like India and did like some stuff with a music platform there. She went to Singapore and she did like a live performance. She did a collaboration with a food brand in Jamaica where she had a live cooking demo and they talked about music and the connection to food. And so she really rethought like how to do this touring thing like online, and you can kind of do the same thing based on your own like interests and your own fan base and like where they're located in the world by exploring and interrogating your own analytics and where those people are and just tap into that thing. But there's a lot of artists overseas that are kind of doing similar things like that. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's all great advice. And really, just to add on to that, the main thing that this pandemic has taught me is you have to open your eyes to other opportunities, right? As an artist, I'm a part of a group, Paid in America, producer and DJ of that group. And the one thing about us, we are a group that relied heavily on touring, right? We don't stream 100,000, listeners a month on Spotify. But what we did do is about we were on the road, I would say at least 2 to 4 times a month, right? And so that's pretty much every other weekend we are doing shows on the road. And if we put a tour together, we were doing about anywhere between 10 to 20 dates per tour that we would do. And we would do that once or twice a year. But so for us, we really took a hit, right? But what really made a difference in our business model is that we had built a very niche market and we collected data, right? Which is super important. So for us, we would always, with anything we do, if we were giving something away, we would always ask for something in return. So if we did a free show, we would say, hey, show is free, but we need your email address or we need your phone number. We would do campaigns to where these um, text campaigns. So we are collecting phone numbers, which is another way of communicating with people. But hey, let's say you want a free T-shirt, text blah 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 to blah blah blah. And what that allowed us to do is to stay connected even during the pandemic. So we're still sending out emails, and we actually released an album during the pandemic to where we can use this opportunity to continue building a listening fan base. So when the world's opens up again and we're able to go out and physically tour, we're able to do so. One thing that has been challenging for us is that we feed off of energy, right? And the one thing that's very difficult to translate in a virtual world is energy, right? Just like we're here and we're having a great conversation here, but nothing beats being in the same room having that conversation. We can really feel the energy of that person. So the key is to find a way to still get energy from a person. So there are ways to do that, right? I think in this time and space, especially for indie artists, this is the time where you can be as transparent as possible. So you have to let people know exactly what's going on in your world right now. You have to almost be more vulnerable than you may have been in the past. So let people know that you're frustrated about not being on the road. That actually opens up opportunities because you become a real person, and you end up getting true fans. Like, you're creating, the one thing that I love saying is always find a way to create a memorable moment. If you can find a way to have a memorable moment with a fan, they'll stay with you forever. So right now, that memorable moment has to be very much transparency. If you have phone numbers, if you have emails, reach out to your fans and tell them, like, hey, what's going on? Like, I know what I'm dealing with. What are y'all dealing with? And have real conversations with them, especially in a time where we can and the technology allows us to have real conversations. And I can almost guarantee that you'll have that fan for a lifetime, as opposed to someone saying, like, oh, I like your music. This is cool. Oh, you're not able to tour anymore? Okay. Well, now you kind of fell off. Like, no, now I have something I can tie to that artist. Man, he called me, she called me during this time. And like, that feels so special to you. Like, all of y'all right now, think about your favorite artist of all time. Now imagine having a 3-minute conversation with them, how much different that would make in your life as a fan, as opposed to thinking about, oh, I wonder what this person is like. It changes the dynamic of the relationship.
I think part of what you touch on, Justin, is what Natalie alluded to, is that fans now are so oversaturated that that
Mhm.
connection point, that experience point might be something beyond the music, that it's going
Right.
to be something that you either, it's like that personal connection, you're checking, hey, how are you, how's it going, right? That like personal touch, right? That emotional bond with your audience. Or it's going to be some other shared interest, right? Let's talk about sneakers, let me show you what I'm cooking for dinner, so that they get to see another side of you, right? It builds that intimacy. um, and so to start to think about what else besides music starts to differentiate you, that your fans can also tap into, because there's so much music. And so it's going to be often something else. And I bet if you think about some of your favorite artists, or people that you really support and get excited about, maybe music was what came first, but it's something else about them that makes you a fan, right? You like the way Megan speaks her mind, you like the way that Meek Mill works on prison reform, you whatever, this, that, and the other. It's probably something in addition to the music that makes you really, really want to speak up for them. The other thing I think that's important to talk about is performance changes now that we're virtual, right? You can't get on stage and be like, oh, get all hype and energy, because it doesn't necessarily always translate the same way. And Natalie and Justin, I'm curious what you see, what makes for a good virtual performance, but also a good virtual experience.
Um, I think that that's actually a great question too, Nora. I think what makes for a good virtual experience is that you make it an experience, right? The one thing, and this, I'm not just saying this because we did this with Dead Music Fest, but we really thought about being at home, right? There's no way to run from it. Artists are at home right now, right? Now, can some artists leave and rent out a space and do a live performance? Absolutely. That is an option, and that's fine. And that's great if you can do that. But the reality is a lot of artists were at home trying to figure out, how can I get this thing recorded into where it works the best. And so we saw with Sylvan Gold, we saw an in-studio performance, right? We also saw with Mercy, where he was laying in the bed, or no, Juno Glock, excuse me, Juno Glock was laying in the bed performing. All of these things are creating those memorable moments, like I said, that impacts people, right? We remember those things, and that seems that we attach to it. So you have to figure out ways to be as creative as possible with your circumstances. So, you know, there was a rapper by the name of Deontay Hitchcock, right? And he's from Atlanta, and we've had him on shows in the past. But what really got attention on him was he started doing freestyles in the car, right? Like he would literally ride down the street on the passenger side of a car and do freestyles. And what happened, he's performing that the entire time. And what happens is people start to take a liking because he was consistent. So the consistency is the other thing to think about. Whatever you want to do, stay consistent in that performance. So if you're doing this level of performance, I mean, yes, we want to get up. Everybody wants the lights, we want the fire, we want all of that, but we have to understand that it takes time to get to some of those things. So utilize the resources that you have and build the best performance that you possibly can, and realize that there is always room for improvement with those performances.
I also think just on the production and some of the best performance that I've seen, especially during the pandemic, are performers, artists that have really taken their sound seriously. Instagram and some of these other platforms, it's really hard to translate the sound unless you know kind of the configurations. Like we've seen on certain shows on Instagram where they didn't have the setup right and the sound was like terrible. That really impacts the people on the other side and also the people in the back on the production end. So really, even if the person throwing the event or you're throwing the event, like really take the sound check seriously and take time to like figure out like, do I need an eye rig? Is my mic too loud? Like, and have somebody on the other end like actually testing that sound, because it's cool if you think it sounds good, but does have your mom or somebody else on the other end like really there with you to like check in the other room or at their house to see like how it sounds to them. And also like I have some folks down in Brazil in Mesila, and they've done a lot of acoustic performances that have been pretty interesting. And the ones that they haven't done, they had like a cool little set or they invited people into their homes. Like, what is your environment? And I want to hone in on what Justin said, kind of about the environment piece. Like, are you a person that hangs out at your house? Like, are you a person that hangs out in your backyard? You can take your performance out into these environments, and that can be your set. You don't have to have like a fancy stage or a sound stage with like hella speakers. I think inviting people into where you are, where you hang out at, where you watch TV or play your guitar or hit the MPC. Um, that's where people need to be with you. That's where your audience wants to see you at. They don't want to see you in these like manufactured environments. Let them see where you are, you know, and I think that's a huge piece to like bring these performance things together. So yeah, sounds, you don't need fancy lights and all that, but do make sure the lighting's good, but you don't need like blaring lights everywhere.
Nor I do want to add one thing to that too, Nat, is and it is so simple, but you know, it has to be said. Practice your performance, right?
Mhm.
I can't stress that enough. Like I know that we're in a pandemic and we're stuck in the house, but the one thing that used to irk me the most when we're facilitating these shows is when I see someone who I can tell never practiced their performance. It makes a difference. The breath control, the eye contact, being on stage and doing this, looking down the entire time is not entertaining. If you engage and look at the artist or look at the audience as you're performing, it makes a huge difference. I wish I do have mics around here, but I have to leave. But okay, here's a mic here, right? This is my podcast mic. Act like this is a performance mic. Never do this. When you cup the mic, you're blocking sound, right? Now this particular mic, you talk on the side, but performance mics you talk here. And so if this area is blocked, no one, it'll sound muffled and it'll be a horrible performance, no matter if you're sweating every piece of clothing that you have on, right? So that those small things make a huge difference. Oh, and don't rap over your vocals. Oh man, please don't rap over your vocals. I'm sorry,
Well,
Nora,
For
but
the
yeah.
for the sanity
no,
of us.
don't be sorry. I mean, and know your lyrics. You know,
Yes.
make sure you have your songs memorized.
Hmm.
And these are things, going back to what Natalie said about, you know, do your sound check, have the rehearsal. These are things that you can invite your audience into, right?
Yes.
Because under like back in the day circumstances, sound check is, I mean, we take sound check for granted, but to a fan, sound check is like this crazy, exciting kind of thing. And now they get to be a part of it. Or to come to a rehearsal, right? We take it for granted, but to a fan, that's entry into a world that they've never been able to see. And so you can share those things. Hey, y'all, how does the sound sound? Do you like my lighting? How does this look? And include them and involve them in the process. Because now that works as fan engagement. Now that works as promotion for your event. And so they get to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
The other thing I think that's so different virtually is the way that people experience an event, right? If I'm at a show, you're on stage, it's me and you, I don't really have distractions. Likely I'm in a venue, I'm not even getting cell phone reception, so my phone's in my back pocket. You have all my attention. But virtually, I might watch you on my computer, but the TV's on, my dog is barking, I'm on whatever app, I'm scrolling. And so to think about how can you create a multi-platform experience so that your audience can be with you in different ways, in different places. So you saw this with Den Music Fest, where we had the YouTube, we had an active chat, and that was very intentional. We brought on moderators to make sure the conversation was going. We gave artists instructions for how to participate. Then we were on Instagram, and then we were on Twitter, and then we had different channels so that people could participate in the experience in the different ways. And so audience, the more virtual we become, the more actually participatory the relationship becomes. And the more you have to think about ways that your audience is active in the experience rather than passively just watching and consuming. And so that's things like, that's everything from like, where's the camera and what are you looking at, right? To make that eye contact, to what's happening in the chat, what's happening in social media, so that you're with your audience in all the different places that they might be. I want to open it up and see if there's questions from anyone who's in the room. If not, we have a ton more topics to keep talking about, but if there's certain things that you want to make sure that we touch on, we'd love to hear from you.
And feel free to type them too if you don't want to turn on your camera and speak.
I would also say like just two last things. When you're performing, like make sure you pay attention to the sequency of your songs. So don't do a fast song. Like if all your songs are fast, like that's cool. But if you start off with a fast song and go slow, you're gonna start to like lose people by the end, especially if they're transitioning to another act. It's like more like upbeat. Like just pay attention to like, again, like reiterating what Nora said, like you're creating experience for people at home. So you need to make sure that your frequency is going from here down here and going up instead of like all over the place. I noticed that a lot of times, like producing and working behind the scenes with different artists doing these virtual events, and a lot of people don't pay attention to that, but I think it's very important, and the audience will pay attention to that. Think about how when you go to a show or you're watching a show online, how people are performing. Do you really want to go from like a fast song and then end up like super like sad? Not, probably not, you know. So yeah, and then also the last thing, there are like different performance platforms and stuff like that, but really I urge you to like look into like Crypto Voxel, or like if you're into gaming, there's tons of things on Roblox that are happening, like concerts. Future also had a performance on Fortnite, and you can do like very similar things on a smaller scale, and those things actually work. But I do think like Crypto Voxel, which is a blockchain platform, is a great place to engage your audience, and you can build your own environment, and you can do different things to like engage folks and grab folks' emails, and they can also tip you. So think about kind of broadening your horizons and looking at these different platforms, and not just going on Instagram because everybody's there. You can definitely like go to Twitch and do a performance. There's a lot of different options.
I think that brings up a good point too about how the financial aspect around virtual performances is shifting a little bit, right? Pre-pandemic, you buy your ticket, you go to the show, it's like very direct. But now there's ways to think about, well, come to my show for free, but here's my merch, or come to my show for free and here's a tip jar, right? And so oftentimes artists make more money off of tips than they do off of like the ticket sales. We, for Den Music Fest, told people pay what you can, you know? And so there's ways to start to think a little more creatively around the financial pieces of how you start to make income. I want to talk about merch a little bit because for a lot of artists, that's a huge way to make money. And I always, with all my clients, I use Paid in America as a great example of merch that I don't need to know who you are as an artist to find that as good merch, right? I might not want to wear your name, but that's a message or something that I relate to. Wait, Justin, can you say something so people can see your shirt? I want to make sure. Were you doing that on purpose?
I wasn't. I was actually looking for something, but this is a hoodie. This is a Paid in America hoodie. This is a straight out the den hat. And all this was not done intentional. I just happened to choose to put this on today. But merch is super important, virtual or in person. And I really can't stress this enough. In business in general, you need a product, right? A product or a service. But if you have a product, then you can always sell something, right? And that doesn't matter if that's a hat, a hoodie. Now, I would be honest with you and say, as an artist, some of the best ideas that you can do is to try to be innovative with your merch. Everyone will have a hat, everyone will have a t-shirt, everyone will have a hoodie, so on and so forth. So try to get creative. So for example, if you're making a song about, I'll use this example, our headliner for the Den Music Fest, Typical Div. He owns he makes his own coffee and sells that coffee, wine, right? So I'll tell you, I've never heard of anybody selling coffee and wine and being a rapper. Never heard of it. And so for me, that sticks out automatically. Before I even listen to one Typical Div verse, I know that he sells coffee. That makes a huge difference because now I can connect those two and we can start a different relationship. Now I'm having coffee conversations with the guy who actually raps exceptionally well, right? So those things make a huge difference. Your merch selection. I'm not saying don't get a hoodie or a t-shirt or a hat. I'm saying make sure you have merch, number one, right? Like that is a given. If you're an artist and you don't have merch, I'm here to tell you that you're missing out on income. Point blank period. You have to at least go in with CDs, right? Or tapes or vinyl. You need to have something. It doesn't make sense today to be an artist without one of those pieces of merch because you're missing out on money. It is simple as that. People want to support and they want to show that they're fans. And one of the biggest ways that they can show support is by purchasing merch.
Natalie, I'm curious if you have good merch examples that you've seen.
Actually, I have a friend in Malaysia. They run DAO Records, which is a record label on the blockchain. I'm like a huge proponent of like blockchain, if you haven't noticed. But they actually produce NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. And what it basically is, they're digitizing merch. So instead of having a physical album, they're creating you can click on this link and basically you'll go to like a visual and then you'll also be able to download the music and they might be like a link to like go to their concert for free. And it might be on a sliding scale. There's a lot of different things that you can do. They're doing a lot of virtual reality stuff. So I actually am going to put some links so you guys can learn how to create your own. But there's definitely like a lot of interesting things happening in the non-fungible token space that people are kind of playing with. I'm not seeing it a lot here in the States. So I think it's a real good opportunity for folks in the Western world to kind of like jump on what's been happening for several years elsewhere and kind of creating your own digital assets. It lowers the production cost, in my opinion. And then also you're providing like a package for folks to like click on. It's easily accessible. You can do like, you can have people pay for it or not. You can create like virtual experiences with this thing. You can do a lot of different things, but just for a clear example, there is a site called Crypto Kittens, and they're basically digital kitties like that people trade and collect and create, and people are paying like $300,000 for like some of them. So there's a lot of money like going on in this space, but a lot of people are kind of like, I don't know what the hell that is. There's also folks that I know that did a album release with this kind of technology, and they were selling their album for like $700 or something, and they made a nice bit of money, you know. So it's a great way to kind of like look at doing something different that other people are not doing. And I'll put some links in the chat so you guys can check it out.
Merch is also a really good place to think about the more you understand your audience, who are they, what do they care about, what do they need, what problems are they facing, then you can create merch that is aimed at them. So if you're, I work with clients who are a little older, they like have families, they have kids. So maybe they don't need like another hoodie, another hat, but they need a diaper bag, right? Or they need like a work bag. And so thinking about how can you get creative in the kind of merch that you design that meets their needs. I think the other thing with merch that gets tricky is it does require an upfront investment often, or you have to have like money to buy it, or you have to invest in like set up a Shopify store. Justin, can you touch on some of the logistics of like how to get merch without having to do some of those like upfront bulk or orders that we had to do back in the day?
Absolutely. The word of the day is drop shipping, right? Drop shipping is a great tool to maximize your merch potential without having to hold on to product, right? One of the biggest things or downfall, I would say, is holding on to merch, right? If you go and spend $500 and you get 1,000 t-shirts, if you don't sell those t-shirts, you're just holding on to product, and you eventually have to go out and drop your price very significantly just to even break even, right? But with drop shipping, and I'll tell you, the company that I use is Printful. And I should put a link here. I should use the affiliate link so we both can, make something happen there. But Printful for me has worked great, right? Every company that I sell merch with, I run directly through Printful. And just to give you a quick overview of what they are a drop shipping company. And what happens is, as long as you have a design, you can put that logo or design on anything that they have. So they have everything from hats to hoodies to totes, bathing suits, beach towels. There are a host of different merch items that they have in their store, all the way up to varsity jackets, socks. There are a lot of things that they have there, right? And so what this does is it allows me to sell my merch without having to hold on to it. And now, while those prices are a little bit higher than normal, for example, if you are going to a local vendor, you may be able to get a t-shirt done for around $3 to $5. Well, that price is going to be a little bit higher because companies like Printful that do drop shipping, they're holding on to your product. So you're getting charged for them to hold on to your product. You're getting charged for them to ship your product, but you can incur those, make up for those costs, by just upping your prices, right? So for example, a hoodie like this on Printful may cost about $20 to make, right? To make, ship, package, all of that. So if I want to make profit, I'll charge $30, right? Or 35 or $40 for a hoodie to make a significant amount of profit on that. As long as you have merch that looks significantly, decent, and you have people that want to purchase that merch, you can make a premium. Yes, it is a little bit different because if you're a touring act, you don't have a lot of product on hand, right? And so that's another layer that you have to deal with. But in a virtual world that we are now, no one has product on hand, right? And so until you're able to get to a point where your margins make sense to have your own facility, drop shipping is a great option to go with. Yes, you will have to, you may lose a little bit of your profit margin, but ultimately it takes out all of the guesswork. Your product was shipped in your own packaging, so it'll look like it came from your warehouse. It is, to me, it's been one of the things that I'll say. I've been doing drop shipping now for about maybe 4 or 5 years. It relieved all the headaches that I had, honestly, because now as an independent, I have to, okay, keep up with my orders. I have to go to package all of my orders. Then I have to go to the post office. I got to keep up with tracking and shipping. All of that stuff is taken care of, and you just sharing a little bit more of your profit. So, drop shipping definitely.
I want to read this comment from Grand Wu that we touched on earlier. One thing Justin mentioned in his podcast a while back in reference to creating merch is to be creative and have an identity. Don't necessarily use your name, have an appealing logo or slogan. Why would I buy a shirt with just your name on it? And so thinking about, there are other ways beyond your name for people to connect with you, identify you, build affinity and affiliation with you. So beyond your name, what are symbols, colors, logos, images that you'll use on your merch, but also use, on your festival background or across your socials or things like that. So it's another chance to be really creative. We're coming up on the hour, so I want to make sure we get a chance to answer everyone's questions before we wrap up. Any other questions that folks have? Okay. So to close out, Nat and Justin, I'll ask you each for one practical piece of advice that you want to leave artists with.
Okay. So the one piece of advice that I would leave artists with is it's funny that Grand Wu said this because Straight Out the Den podcast is a podcast that I did for years and it's really giving out a lot of this information. But one of those conversations was defining your avatar, right? And what I mean by avatar is your audience. A lot of times as artists, we think that because social media has 20, hundreds of millions of people, that we can reach hundreds of millions of people, right? And the biggest mistake that artists make is they don't define who they are, who their audience is. So what I say is define your avatar. What I mean by that is go from the head to the toe of what you think your audience member looks like, right? And that means that's everything from how old they are, what type of clothes they like to wear, where do they like to shop, do they have a family, are they college educated, did they finish high school? All of these things really make a difference because now, if I know, for example, if I know that my audience member or my avatar is someone that is 35 to 40 years old, they're a college graduate, they're married with 3 kids, then guess what? They don't have time to pull up to a kickback. It's not happening. So stop trying to push them to come to a kickback. What you could be doing is something else, right? Like they might enjoy a wine tasting or something like. And these are extreme things, but you have to keep that thing in mind. So once you define your avatar, and I mean really get super deep detail, like don't say 35 to 30 to 40. Say that my ideal audience member is 37 years old. And I know that may seem a little much, but what that does is it blocks out certain things in your mind. You stop focusing on trying to sell hoodies when if your market don't rock hoodies, right? If your audience member is if your avatar is someone that lives in Miami, Florida, guess what? They're never buying a hoodie from you. They don't have, there's no opportunity to really wear a hoodie. They may love some beach wear though, right? So you have to have those type of things in mind so you can know exactly the people that you're dealing with as opposed to just trying to shoot from the hip.
Natalie?
I think my advice is similar to Justin, but I would say prioritize. Are you trying to build brand awareness? Are you trying to build an audience? Like in this time period, are you trying to get some money or whatever? Like what are your objectives at the moment? And don't try to be everything for everyone and don't try to be everywhere because you're going to stretch yourself thin. And then from there you can check out your analytics. Where is my audience at? Are they in Albania? Are they in Miami? Are they in San Francisco? And from there you can look at what festivals are going online in San Francisco, what are in California or in that region of the world. Are there festivals in Brazil? Because I have tons of audience, tons of folks down there that are rocking my music. Is there a festival down there that I can check into or connect with? And you'd be surprised, like reaching out to folks, how open they are to like connecting with you and maybe having you perform or do a Q&A or tell you about what's going on in your neck of the woods. You actually be surprised, but be creative when you're pitching folks and um, really focus on building relationships and for the long haul, not just now and for like what you need. So there's kind of focus on your strategy in this pandemic because let's be frank, we don't know how long we're going to be in this space. So really hone in and like start building those relationships based on like where your folks are at, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, and I just to take it one step from Natalie, really think about what kind of artist do you want to be? Do you want to be an onstage performing artist? Do you want to be writing for other people? Do you want to be doing, you know, syncs and placements? There's a ton of different ways to achieve success in the industry. And so thinking about what do you want to do? Who do you want to do it for? And then building out a strategy that way will really help you to both what Justin and Natalie said, focus so that you can get the outcome that you're aiming for. So thank you all for hanging out with us today. This concludes our 2-day 4th annual Den Music Fest 2020, year 4. Definitely, if you didn't get a chance to watch any of or participate in any of the other artist development sessions, those will all be online, as is the festival. If you want to go back and replay some of the amazing performances that we had, those will all also be online. We'll be back again next year, Den Music Fest 2021. And so we really invite all of you to stay in touch with us throughout the year. If you have successes, things you want us to celebrate, things you want us to amplify, artists that you want to connect with that are part of our family, reach out to me, reach out to Justin, reach out to Den Music Fest. We're really here to see you all shine and succeed and be successful because we do this because it's a community, you know, we love the community. And so thank you all for being part of our community. Justin, any final words to wrap us up?
Thank you. Really, it's the main thing. For those that saw the festival itself, at the beginning, you may have noticed that Nora and I spoke on, we had a lot of things planned for 2020. And due to the pandemic, we had to shift those plans. But one of those things that were on the list was to do a artist development session. And we were able to accomplish that. And I'm so grateful that we were able to do that. A lot of valuable information came from the 3 sessions today. And we had a lot of dope performances that took place yesterday. And one thing that I can truly say is when it comes to the music and when we find artists that are super dope, we tend to stick with them for a long time. So thank you to all the artists. Thank you to all of the people that are here that showed up for the sessions. We truly appreciate it. It's great to know that all of the hard work means something to other people and not just to Nora and myself. So thank you all, truly.
Yeah. And Natalie, thank you for being on the panel. Shout out to Culture Fix for all the support and allyship. We'll see you all next year. Thanks, everybody.